I'm calling to order this hearing. This is a public hearing of the Committee of the Whole of the Council of the District of Columbia. I'm Phil Mendelson, Chair of the Council and Chair of the Committee of the Whole. Today is Monday, February 9th, 2026. The time is 12:47 in the afternoon. And this hearing concerns both oversight as well as consideration of a bill. The bill is 26-489, entitled the PACE Clarification Amendment Act of 2025. This legislation was introduced roughly 3 months ago, November 17th, by Councilmember Christina Henderson, joined by Councilmembers Louis George, Robert White, Anita Bonds, and Brooke Pinto. Bill 26-489, and Councilmember Henderson is here, so I suspect she'll say more about it. The bill directs DCPS to calculate prioritization scores for every school in its portfolio, to publicize the underlying scores for those prioritizations, and to improve processes for modernizing facilities with historical designations. DCPS currently does not consider schools that have already received modernizations when constructing their prioritization list. However, several schools, like those that received partial modernizations by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers roughly 20 years ago, face consistent facilities challenges based on the age and quality of those modernizations and are not considered for new modernizations. In addition, we're using this hearing as general oversight with regard to implementation of the PACE Act. In fact, the topic is oversight on 10 years of PACE Act. The purpose of this oversight is to identify areas for improvement more generally. In November 2016, the council adopted Bill 21-777, Planning Actively for Comprehensive Education Facilities Amendment Act of 2016. The PACE Act requires the mayor to submit a 10-year master facilities plan for public education facilities, sets requirements for school capital improvement plans, and outlines a process to prioritize school facility modernizations. The PACE Act has brought much needed structure for prioritizing schools for modernization and effective planning for those modernizations fiscally and organizationally. With regard to this hearing and the legislation, the record will be open for 2 weeks. That is, it will close at 5 p.m. on Monday, February 23rd, 2026. Folks have 2 weeks if they want to get comments in for the record. We have 14 witnesses. Before I recognize any of them, let me turn to my colleague, Councilmember Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you so much for holding this hearing today, both on the bill, but as well as a look back on the Planning Effectively for Comprehensive Education Facilities Amendment Act of 2016. Ooh. Fun fact, in 2016, I wrote the original PACE Act as a staffer for former at-large Councilmember David Grasso. And it's not often that we have the ability to take a look at 10 years of implementation of a particular law. Some people don't remember what the capital improvement plan process for DCPS was like pre-PACE. There's one simple word: it was chaotic. While there were some schools that received renovations in the early 2000s, when the then Fenty administration started to do school modernizations in earnest, it wasn't done in any sort of systematic way. And as a result, school communities that had the resources and time to organize had T-shirts, they had yard signs, they would have town hall meetings. Every DCPS budget hearing was only about capital modernizations, and the schools that were able to effectively organize went first, and everyone else waited, which resulted in some schools seeing terrific modernizations, but it was not consistently applied across facilities based on who needed the most immediate attention and need. And so PACE was enacted to address many of those concerns by creating a comprehensive model based on assessment of facility condition, demand, community need, and equity. Since then, we've made some significant investments in our public schools, and there's still some work to be done. DCPS currently implements the law from a narrow scope by prioritizing schools that have never been modernized in the capital improvement plan. Because of this, schools that don't meet the current education specifications, such as those modernized in the early 2000s by the Army Corps of Engineers, are not considered eligible for modernizations and therefore are not included in the prioritization, even though if anyone visited those buildings, they would severely question why they have not been prioritized. That exercise of discretion does not align with the spirit of the original law and has prevented schools with terrible conditions from getting the modernizations that they need. The bill under consideration today would require DCPS to calculate the prioritization scores for all of those facilities, regardless of whether or not they have been previously modernized. By updating the calculations to reflect the full universe of schools, we're improving accuracy of our projections and the fairness of the investments. This bill also encourages collaboration and transparency among our agencies by requiring education and historic preservation agencies to establish an inventory of schools with historic designations or eligibility and compile a reference of the law and policies that may be impacting their future development. I think together, these changes will push us closer to where we need. And I'm excited for the conversation today. And thank you in advance to all the public witnesses who have signed up to testify. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilmember Henderson. I'm going to call half the witnesses, roughly. Depends on how quickly that table fills up. Laura Fuchs, who's President, Washington Teachers Union. Mary Filardo, who's Executive Director of the 21st Century School Fund. Scott Goldstein, Executive Director of Empower Ed. Will Perkins. Julie Lawson. Kenneth Leslie. Dylan Craig. Lisa Corchado. Come on forward. I'm going to stop there. There are another roughly 7 witnesses. Most everybody's online. A couple of people are not here at all. Was just pointing out to me, you're with the Czech students, all of whom are signed up, and I guess are sitting here. Of course, I can't fit all of them at the table at once. Do you want to wait for them, or do you want to go? I mean, I have 6 people before you, but do you want to wait for them? Or okay, that's up to you. So why don't I do that? But they can't come up now because I know it looks lonely there, but there are actually 5 people online. So we're going to hear from them, and then I'll hear from you. So again, Laura Fuchs, I think, is not here. Mary Filardo.
Can you hear me, Phil?
I hear you.
Okay. What are we? Good afternoon. Shall I go ahead and start?
Yes, please.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for inviting my testimony. It's been a number of years since I've been before the city council, as I've been working a lot on state and federal policy. But I'm Mary Filardo, Executive Director of the 21st Century School Fund. And the 21st Century School Fund is working to advance policy and practice for healthy, safe, educationally appropriate public school facilities that are community accessible, educationally appropriate, and are environmentally sustainable, but also affordable. We do this through our research, advocacy, and technical assistance at local, state, and federal levels. And, as I've had the opportunity over the decades now to see what's happening nationally, I want to make some observations about DC's public education infrastructure program. And the district has one of the most ambitious public school facility modernization programs in the United States. There is no other city of comparable size that has accomplished what DCPS has for its public school buildings and grounds. And I suspect most people can't see the chart that I put in my testimony, but what it shows is that on a per student basis, over the last 10 years, the District of Columbia has spent almost $100,000 a student and about $327 a square foot on its capital infrastructure for DCPS. There's an additional there's almost $5 billion. For the charter schools, it's about $1.5 billion. But compared to Baltimore, Boston, Seattle, and San Francisco Unified, all of these other cities really have not been able to do nearly the amount to bring their buildings into good repair and modern conditions as the District of Columbia. So, I actually think that's a credit. I know that there were savings that we could have seen along the way, but I think that the council and the people of the District of Columbia really deserve a lot of credit for caring about our school buildings and doing something about it. One of the other things that has actually is parallel to this is DCPS is ranked as one of the fastest improving urban school districts, according to the National Assessment of Education Progress. And while the research hasn't been done on it for the District of Columbia, I think that the impact of facility conditions that we know now occurs on student achievement, teacher retention, health metrics that are also related to academic performance strongly suggest that the modernized DCPS schools are one of the contributing factors in improved student performance. And then finally, in terms of a kind of an overall observation, it really was a convergence in the city of civic interests, business interests, and political interest that has sustained a very robust council policy planning and budgeting kind of process. And Councilmember Henderson, I remember that you drafted that bill many years ago, and I think that it absolutely contributed to a more equitable prioritization, not necessarily always the most equitable outcomes, because it didn't look at the outcomes. It looked at sort of its role in the process. But and on the PACE Act itself, you'll hear from Will Perkins later on, and his specific recommendations I think are excellent, and so want to express my support for that. But what I think I want to focus on is where are we now, and what are the big hard issues that we should be looking at? And I think there are three. One of them has to do with really still the organization of our public system. And this has to do with the sector allocation, the fact that we have over 60 school districts, and the District of Columbia Public Schools has about 14 million square feet of space with capacity for at least 70,000 students. And those 20,000 students that are not in DCPS, if the ones that are in the charters, that costs us $77 million a year in a facility allowance. So we've made this enormous investment in our infrastructure. What can we be doing actually to fully utilize that investment before it depreciates, right? So how do we think about that investment as it relates to the sector organization? The second thing is that we have, the 25-year investment in 2024 dollars is over $10 billion in our infrastructure. And we will not retain that over 25 years if we don't have a very strong technical capacity to maintain it. And so the question is, what is our plan for the capital maintenance? And how are we going to ensure our assets are well taken care of? Are we going to just keep doing it sort of ad hoc while these contracts, like To a Spectrum or many other contractors, I'm sure, working on the operations and maintenance of our schools? Or will we invest in in-house capacity to do that? And then the third big area of concern is that in the district, and frankly in many, many states nationwide, there's downward pressure on birth rates, the depressed in-migration of families due to national immigration policy. And these are going to hit both the charter sector and the DCPS sector. And how are we going to make sure that we retain a robust infrastructure, particularly at the neighborhood level? And at the same time, use our infrastructure that we've invested in so heavily to serve other vulnerable populations, particularly our aging population here in the District of Columbia. So these are not any of them easy issues to address, but I think a focus on the common good as we look at these things will soften the pressures of privilege bias that we actually find in this capital decision making, and would really look forward to seeing DC set a path forward on these challenges as well as it did on the overall modernization investment. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Filardo. Scott Goldstein.
Good afternoon. The PACE Act has been an important tool to ensure equity in how we modernize DC schools over the past decade. School modernization has truly been one of the milestone achievements in DC education in the last 20 years, slowly but surely delivering school buildings to students that convey that we value each and every one of them. While modernizations and especially maintenance has been a large challenge across the city, it's great that the city has made an effort to prioritize equity. This legislation being discussed today makes plain sense. We should consider all facilities when doing PACE ranking. I've been in many schools that were in the first round of modernizations that are badly out of date, and by today's standards, you wouldn't call them modernized at all. I want to testify today and raise one other important issue that I think should be considered: the availability of outdoor space, both for learning and play. This was an important update made to the master facilities plan in the last round and has been an important update to how schools are designed in some inspiring ways here in DC in the past decade, with real intention to provide usable outdoor space. Still, despite its mention in the master facilities plan, it does not seem like we're taking this into account and prioritizing schools that need modernization or doing all that we can to ensure quality outdoor space as part of design. The MFP actually directs DCPS to consider outdoor space availability, outdoor classrooms, and more in site evaluation. The PACE Act should align with this by including elements in prioritization either in Section 3B1 or 3D, and then additionally in Section 4 to include an outdoor play and learning space equity audit. Peer-reviewed research proves that outdoor learning improves student academic achievement, engagement, attendance, and mental health. When students spend time outdoors, research shows they do significantly better in the classes that follow, pay more attention, retain more, and improve outcomes. The truth is that many students who grow up in urban environments are not given the opportunity to connect with nature and take advantage of the many academic, physical, and mental health benefits associated with going outside. Since COVID, educators have reported higher than normal incidents of aggression and inappropriate behavior by students, something well demonstrated to be reduced by time outdoors. During the pandemic, OSSI paid for the planning and design of 63 outdoor learning labs across the city. They never followed through on the funding and actually build of these sites, and despite our annual advocacy, this council still has not budgeted for it either. This has left many schools that planned for outdoor classrooms without them, and that means students in schools where students are farther behind in math and reading keep getting consigned to a narrower learning experience. Our city fails to ensure minimum time in recess, as many states require, and places such an emphasis on standardized testing and accountability systems that students spend less and less time each year in enriching learning environments and lessons. Students deserve better. Unfortunately, our city has thought of outdoor space for learning and play as a nice to have and not a critical element of education and equity. By including availability of quality outdoor space available in two categories, play and learning, in the PACE Act, we can take one small step toward equity in the student experience at school, improving student mental health and academic outcomes. And the council should finally follow through on the funding of the 63 designed and never built outdoor learning labs. I have up each of the sections of the MFP and how they should correlate to the PACE Act, and I'd be happy to talk more about that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goldstein. Will Perkins.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and Councilmember Henderson. My name is Will Perkins. Thank you for scheduling this hearing. I'm here to talk about my experience with the PACE Act and recommendations for improving it. As I said, I'm here in my personal capacity, but in a previous life, I did serve as council staff and for nearly 4 years and worked as 2 years as committee director for the Committee on Facilities and also with Mary at the 21st Century School Fund. In each role, I tracked the DCPS capital budget very closely and developed a keen understanding of the PACE Act, both its strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities for improvement. First, some very clear praise for Councilmember Henderson and her roles as staff with Councilmember Grasso. I believe the PACE Act stands apart for putting policy and data above politics. It is quite unique in that regard. It's a triumph, in my opinion, of rational decision, data-driven policymaking that's all too rare locally and certainly federally. The council and the mayor have further built on that with continued sustained investment that has really transformed the school system dramatically in the 9 years since the law was passed. So thank you both for your leadership and for your colleagues and the mayor in particular. So then I do have 5 specific recommendations I want to run through very quickly. So number 1, the council would do better to clarify the critical plan elements that are needed in the next 10-year MFP. In 2019, the council disapproved the MFP as, quote, not a plan end quote, for lacking critical elements, specifically citing overcrowding, underutilization, and an ill-defined FCI or facility condition index. The code has 12 specific things that are required to be in the full 10-year MFP, labeled A through L. However, they're honestly a little wonky and could use a tighter draft. And so again, if there's any concern that the next full MFP it would be delivered on those requirements, the council would do better to clarify what exactly is needed in that full MFP so that we can make sure it's approved on the first time go around this time. Number 2, I would recommend that we codify recent improvements to the MFP annual supplement. There's separate requirements for the annual supplement. They've done 5 separate annual supplements since the law was passed. The 2024 annual supplement, in my opinion, is the best one yet, which is great. However, the council should make sure to codify some of the improvements we've seen with that. Specifically, they actually have school-specific recommendations for how to address overcrowding and underutilized schools. Previously, they had the same sentence quite often over 4 separate reports for both high utilization schools and very low utilization schools. They would say DCPS will monitor enrollment to ensure satisfactory learning environment is provided. They'd say that both for the very crowded schools and the very undercrowded schools. And so again, they have added a better, more detailed plan for addressing those now. And I would recommend the council codify that improvement. Number 3, clarify PCSB and DGS roles regarding charter school data. The law has a role for PCSB to collect and transmit data on existing public charter schools facilities to the DME. It also then has a policy for DGS to do an annual survey. There's a quote in my testimony from the 2016 PACE Act committee report that could be written exactly as it is today, unfortunately. Since the law passed, the PCSB is still doing an annual survey rather than DGS, and the survey results shared in the annual MFP annual supplement are aggregated across the entire sector. So we know, for example, in my testimony, I show 10% of schools have asbestos. We don't know which ones. 83% of schools have some sort of accessibility equipment. We don't know which ones. There's a whole list there. We do not, the law requires disaggregated data and for the survey to be conducted by DGS. For some reason, it's not. There may be some political issue or a misunderstanding of the law, but I would again encourage you to dig into that further with DGS and DCPS as to why that's the way they've implemented it. Number 4, require that DCPS share long-range swing space plans. The only thing in the code it actually requires is that they share whether it's on-site or off-site. As you may hear from later on from other public witnesses, it's actually quite important to families and staff to know where they're going to be swinging if it's off-site. And that was the practice, but then in recent years, they've shifted to just say off-site. That's actually a very big deal for schools and for council members as further out in the CIP to know where that is. In our role with, in my previous role with council staff, we use that information to help identify better options for people. And that's something that the DCS has taken away, but again, is allowed under the current code. My last recommendation is that council consider something like PACE for small capital projects. As mentioned, as more and more schools become modernized, the small capital projects are very, very important. There's a lot of money there. There's a lot of projects, but right now it's the Wild West. It is completely not controlled, or at least not transparent to folks to know when their playground will be fixed, when their roof will be fixed, when their HVAC is going to be fixed. These are all very important things, but and that's a much bigger undertaking to go at because it's a much more subjective system as far as I know. So that's my testimony. I did include some questions in case those are helpful as you engage with your government witnesses later on. So thank you for letting me go a little bit long on the time. Appreciate your time and attention to this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins. Julie Lawson.
Hi, good afternoon. Chairman Mendelson and members and staff of the Committee of the Whole. My name is Julie Patton Lawson. I'm a longtime resident and education advocate in Ward 4, and I'm a parent and LSAT member at McKinley Tech High School. I first started testifying to council about education issues more than 10 years ago when my son was in pre-K 4 at Whittier Elementary. Whittier will finally get its modernized building for school year 28-29 when my son will be a senior. I am here today knowing that my advocacy will not improve the building conditions for my son and his current classmates, but for all the students still to experience tech and other schools in DCPS that have been left behind. I echo the kudos to Councilmember Henderson for introducing this legislation and the innovative 2016 original version. I appreciate the objectivity the PACE Act has attempted to bring to prioritizing modernizations, but it has lacked nuance about how school buildings are actually used, particularly for specialized purposes. Whittier was always pushed down the priority list because of its utilization score, derived from its above average number of self-contained classrooms that have lower limits for student occupancy than general education classrooms. That didn't stop the pipes from bursting, the ceiling from falling, or the floors from buckling. McKinley is DCPS's elite high school for STEM. It should be able to house complete, modern, and future-forward labs for all of its academies, engineering, biotechnology, and information technology. It should be an inspiring space for students to achieve their dreams, allowing them to become DC-grown leaders in these innovations. Instead, the classrooms are far from meeting current ed specs, much less what's needed for the technology required for these courses. Some are small, some are oddly shaped, some are poorly lit. The Army Corps didn't upgrade the HVAC back in the early 2000s. The replacement parts for that system aren't even manufactured anymore. The electrical can't keep up with the tech that the school is able to get through generous partners. This isn't necessarily the fault of DGS or DCPS. It's that the campus was renovated more than 20 years ago by a team that didn't understand schools or talk to the community about its needs. Since McKinley and other Army Corps schools are currently not in the capital improvement plan, I presume it will be another decade before they benefit, meaning it'll be 30 years out. While DC's budgets don't look like we can add schools to the CIP right now, this amendment will allow this batch of schools to be considered for prioritization in the next report. I hope future school communities will continue to advocate for this. I'll add that in preparing for this testimony, I could not easily find a list of how schools are currently prioritized other than what's released in the CIP each spring. I support this line of the proposed amendment because school communities should have access to that data for transparency and accountability. As written, the language presumes that the second report will be published a year in advance of the next master facilities plan required of the DME every 10 years. While the intent of the PACE Act was to prevent unjustified and inequitable access by squeaky wheels, withholding or burying that information also limits the ability of any school to advocate for needs that might have been missed by decision makers. Aligning this information with the master facilities plan release is key, particularly as it informs recommendations to changes to boundaries, feeder patterns, and cross-sector coordination. To that point, I want to reiterate the comments from Will Perkins about planning for swing space, as Whittier was a key example, particularly as it can support schools in sustaining even enrollment and thus budget and staffing. I'm happy that your next panelist is Ken Leslie, McKinley's longtime director of engineering, who has taught me so much about the history of the building and the opportunities ahead. It's unfortunate that he's been able to use spaces in the building to teach about poor acoustics and physics to students. So thank you for this amendment and for your commitment to DC Public Schools. I will remain online for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Lawson. Kenneth Leslie.
Good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson and members of the council. I'm Ken Leslie. I'm a Hillcrest resident. I'm an educator since 2003 and a retired licensed mechanical engineer. Currently, I'm the director of the Academy of Engineering at McKinley Tech, but I was also a parent of two graduates of Benjamin Banneker Academic High School back in the early 2000s. So I want to take a few minutes why I think we need to look beyond the surface of our buildings when we consider the PACE Act. When I started the Engineering Academy in 2008, I had few real-world resources outside the general materials provided by the PLTW curricula that we used. Since then, I have accumulated world-class tools for my students to learn on. In my labs, I have a $250,000 3D printer a powder bed printer. I have 4 FDM printers at different labs, one of the only water jets in the city, and a laser in every classroom. I have CNC machines, an electronics lab. The big 3D printer in the robotics lab has to be protected with a tarp because the roof leaks. We have been plagued by problems like this since our reopening. Memorial Hall is a beautiful space that we can't use. A botched repair last summer caused condensation from the auditorium air handler to leak onto the ceiling, and that ceiling is now collapsing. Years ago, there were gas leaks in the cafeteria, forcing us to evacuate multiple times until the leaks were found. Stairwells that started to blister because the flow of moisture through the walls was never addressed. I bring these issues up because too many compromises were made when the building was renovated by the Army Corps of Engineers. The critical infrastructure of the building was not addressed. The HVAC, power, water, the structures, these need to be rock solid. My reading of the PACE calculations didn't take these issues into account. These systemic failures are hurting our ability to provide the world-class program that our students deserve. So I'm asking that the council ensure that the PACE algorithm accounts for these the mechanical health of the building and not just the cosmetics. I can build programs that'll change students' lives, but I need a safe, dry, warm, and in the summer, cool building to do it in. Thank you. I appreciate the time, and as always, I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Leslie. Dylan Craig.
Good afternoon, council members. I am Dylan Craig, a teacher and LSAT chair at Garnett Patterson Stay Opportunity Academy, currently on lunch, vice president of high schools on the WT Executive Board, and a Ward 4 resident. I am testifying in support of the PACE Clarification Amendment Act being discussed today. PACE has been instrumental in improving school facilities, but the changes introduced in this legislation make perfect sense in creating a more equitable process for evaluating the needs of schools. As we saw with the most recent winter storm, just because a school has been modernized, many of which were modernized over 2 decades ago at this point, does not mean that facilities are functioning adequately. This leads to classrooms that are too cold or too hot and creates unsuitable learning environments for students and educators. Even in schools that were modernized more recently, problems can still arise. Wiping our hands clean of proper facilities oversights because the modernization box was already checked or the building has been designated historic is negligent. In order to be a responsive district and continuously prioritize the facilities in which students learn and educators work, we must have a full account of the conditions of facilities in all of our school buildings. And this information should be made as public and as transparent as possible in order for school communities to understand and utilize the information for advocacy. At Garnett Patterson Stay, we were incredibly grateful for the support from the council in our relocation from the Roosevelt High School building to the Garnett Patterson building. We were grateful for the funds to fix up the building and for the current support in constructing a childcare facility that will be able to serve both our student parents and the surrounding community. However, we were never modernized, and because of our recent move, we do not get the benefit of a facility condition assessment, though our space was simply given a faceless, and our community deserves a deeper assessment to understand our needs and make sure conditions are suitable after occupying an older building. Again, the changes in this legislation are a common sense way to make the process more equitable for facilities like ours and others across the district. Again, I also encourage facility condition assessments to be made known and available for school communities so they could be included in the process and have the information necessary to advocate for their needs. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. Thank you, each of you, for your testimony. Oh, no, Lisa Corchado. Let's go with you. Yeah, press the button. You're on.
Okay, you guys can hear me? Okay,
Yes.
great. Good afternoon, council members. Mr. Mendelson, I'm a fan. Mrs. Anderson, I'm a new fan. My name is Lisa Corchado, and I am a parent of a student at Columbia Heights Education Campus, located on 16th Street Northwest, and I am an LSAT committee member and also a PTSO member, Parent Teacher Student Organization. And I will try to be concise. Parents are in strong support of the changes to the mandate to the PACE Act because the school is in dire need of repairs. The missing treads on the stairs, the broken handles on the stairs and doors, the windows that don't latch and slam shut as soon as you attempt to open them, and worst, uh, exposed electrical wires. And these things are not only hazardous, but also a liability issue. And these issues can cause great harm to the students and staff. Moreover, our outdoor area and sports area are not up to facility standard. The nets are ripped and the balls frequently go into a adjacent parking lot, which is exposing children to speeding cars. The scoreboard doesn't work and the location of the bathroom poses a serious security risk. Also, the auditorium controls don't work and the mechanics don't move, and it's possibly going back to the electrical issues. We have placed 43 work orders over the last 6 months and have not had any response, much less any kind of repair. And the parents want these issues addressed before a tragedy occurs. And my only question is, what can we do on our end to ensure that we are at the very least placed on the list for these repairs? Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Corchado. I don't have a copy of your statement if you want to provide it.
Absolutely.
Okay, you can give it to us after the hearing or,
Oh, okay.
I just have a couple of questions and we'll have can do a 10-minute round, but I hope I'm not 10 minutes.
Sure.
Ms. Corchado, what can you all do? Well, one thing is you can be present at hearings like this. We have another hearing coming up on DCPS oversight. We'll have a hearing on their budget.
Mhm.
Folks from Czech showing up. That's one way to get more attention. And with this amendatory legislation, which wouldn't become law right away,
Right.
there would be more opportunity for Czech to be prioritized. I would say just speaking out and making clear the issues with the building.
Okay.
The building is new, but it was built, what, 20 years
it's-
ago, 15 years
It's been
ago?
20 years. Yeah. And I please correct me if I'm wrong. I think that may be one of the reasons why it's not on a current list, but it has been 2 decades. And
That would be why it's not on the current list. Sometimes I question whether the government is doing enough to maintain schools in a state of good repair so that the problems do not accelerate or become cumulative in nature. I had a couple of questions for Ms. Falardo. I think it was a couple.
Yeah.
I wanted you to say more about maintenance plans. What do you see with regard to maintenance, the city keeping up with the new schools as they modernize them?
Well, essentially the system the city has is a reactive one. You have to submit work orders. There's not an actually intentional operations and maintenance plan for every school. And this is a problem. I mean, we're not going to have 25-year life to our buildings if we're not actually intentionally doing the operations and maintenance planning. And so, I mean, I think that's what you're hearing about Czech, that this is going to be the case for a lot of these schools. And so, I mean, I think that we've done a great job trying to get the master plan and the capital plans out in front and transparent. It's just not there on the maintenance side. And there's just no building. There's no building that will just, kind of skate through. They all deteriorate. They all have pressures on them for maintenance and they need to be planned. but they're for the most part not. It's a, you know, again, it's a reactive system.
My other question for you is looking at the table, which I think you're right, nobody got to see. If I read the table correctly, there's a cost per gross square foot for the renovations. Am I reading this correctly?
It's the expenditure across the entire inventory for DCPS. So that's basically what we've spent in the last 10 years, as though it were average across every square footage of the system. We didn't spend $327 a square foot on every square foot. Some places we spent 700, some places we spent, you know, less, but that's what that is. And it's there really so that folks can see, as compared to Boston or San Francisco or Seattle or Baltimore, kind of how DC ranks.
Well, you made the point that per student, we're spending more than other districts, suggesting that we're willing to invest more or are able to invest more than other districts. But the cost per gross square foot says to me, or speaks to me, about whether we're spending economically. That's a different question. So
Right.
the fact that we're willing to modernize 5 buildings in a year and other districts are not, that's great. But if we're doing it at each building for twice the cost that other school districts are paying, that raises a question whether we're being
Well,
careful with our dollars.
so Phil, that number is not what they're spending on a per square foot basis. Boston is $900 a square foot they're spending. When they're actually, like, they built a new high school there recently. And the issue is whether or not on a sort of taking all of their dollars, what the amount per square foot represents is how little investment in the portfolio the other districts are doing compared to DC. It's not about the spending on a per square foot basis. DC is fairly comparable to, you know, Philadelphia, Boston, Baltimore, in terms of what we're spending on a per square foot basis. It's really the planning decisions are where we find the challenges, and that's where, I've had old complaints about the fact that, Ellington was modernized as the, performing arts school and not Cardozo. Those were like $100 million decisions, which meant that we were going to end up buying MacArthur, which is $100 million decision, rather than having Ellington there as our Western, kind of former West. So it's really more, I would argue that it's the macro planning decisions that have been really costly for the district. The classroom modernization program that Fenty put in place, where we went into schools and modernized classrooms without having done the HVAC systems, so that then we went in and remodernized after we had already done classrooms. Those were torn out and put back in again. I think it's, as we've done the design and construction, it's pretty comparable to what we've been seeing in other urban communities. It's the plan decisions. It's those are the ones where we really, have cost ourselves. And frankly, the sector issue is incredibly costly. Maintaining, over 200 schools for less than 100,000 kids is a really expensive proposition, and maintaining them and, putting in the capital. I mean, the charter sector has over $1 billion of capital debt, right? Which is, of course, why we have the pressure on that facility allowance, because, they have some real liabilities associated with it. But it's not actually what we're spending on a per square foot basis, which is the biggest problem. It's our decision making on our projects.
Got it. Thank you. That's helpful. Councilmember Henderson, if you have questions.
I do. Thank you so much to this panel of witnesses. Some of the testimony, whether it be around Czech or McKinley Tech, sort of underscore why we felt like we needed to go back on this clarification, because again, when you visit those school facilities and then you're looking like, okay, where are you guys on the PACE list? And you're like, wait, you're not on the PACE list. What happened? And so that's what we're hoping to clarify before DCPS does a recalculation, which I believe is happening in the next year or so. I do have a couple of follow-up questions. First off, Mary, it's so good to see you. We did work on this bill together, and frankly, 21st Century School Fund was the keeper of so much data that served as a good source, because there's so much parts of data and information about DC schools that were in a variety of different agencies that didn't exist anymore, and in a lot of different places. Will, I wanted to ask your testimony, and part of the recommendations that you raised, one was to clarify parts of the MFP. I pulled up that section of the code 382803, and it seems fairly straightforward to me. What is asked for, right? Like a safety and security assessment, location and planning use for campuses that are not currently occupied, historical and projected enrollment. What were you meaning when you said maybe we need to clarify exactly what we're asking for?
Sure, and thank you, Councilmember. I think I think around a plan. I think, the words plan are not, I would say, prominent in that. Again, in terms of like, how do we want to structure our system? Where do you want things to go? In the sort of programmatic sense, that's really for me what is most missing is
Okay.
similar to what Mary mentioned, the programmatic needs, in addition to sort of the space and demographics.
Yeah. And I think, though, the next MFP is going to be kind of an interesting one anyway, because of what we're seeing around population, birth rate decline. I feel like the next MFP, we're going to be having the very same conversation that a lot of universities are currently having, which is what do we do in 8 to 10 years when we have a bunch of buildings, and we just simply are not, the population is not producing enough students to fill the capacity of these institutions. And I don't think it would just be a conversation for DCPS. I think it's going to be a conversation for the Public Charter School Board as well. How do you continue to approve new schools when the population is not changing? So it's essentially we're robbing Peter to pay Paul. And per, Mary's analysis, that's just costing us more money on the facility side of things. On that, I would just mention, because you brought it up in your testimony about the annual facility survey that we require of the charter schools. I don't feel like we've reopened this conversation with them in the last 10 years, but essentially what happened was they didn't want DGS in their buildings. And so we had to figure out what is another way for us to be able to get the information without you wanting DGS to be able to enter your facilities. But it was never meant to be in the aggregate. It was always meant to be by building, which we just never got to. And so that perhaps is something that we need to push on as well. Ms. Lawson and Mr. Leslie, can I ask, in terms of some of the issues with regard to McKinley Tech, Mr. Leslie, when you were sort of mentioning, right, you have 3D printing equipment that you have to keep in a certain area because the roof leaks. What is the conversations with DGS around the work order and maintenance pieces? Because I imagine at some point it goes beyond small capital project, and we're just putting Band-Aids on something that just needs to be fixed altogether.
Well, if I can address that directly, the issue I have in particular, because I'm in what's we call the broadcast building, which I prefer calling our robotics lab. But back when we reopened in 2004, this was the home of District Schools Television. But that being said, I had been advocating for a new roof for almost a decade now. They would come up, put Band-Aids on, do some repairs, and within 18 months, it was leaking again. Finally, this year, we're actually getting a new roof, and they were halfway through it when this ice storm hit. So that's kind of on hold until they can actually get back on the roof again.
Okay.
But that's the kind of issue that I've been dealing with, is I put the tickets in and then I put it in again, and then I have to put it in again. I mean, my next fight is going to be HVAC in this particular building because it's worse than the main building. And just as a colleague from, I'm sorry, it was Czech. I'm sorry.
Mhm.
I've lost track of what school he was from. But yeah, we have rooms that are hot and then rooms that are cold all on the same day. The systems were never balanced properly. We had to bring in a temporary chiller last summer because the main chillers for this campus were just not working.
Okay. And so you're saying that, well, I guess as they refer to as the broadcast building, the HVAC for the broadcast building is different than the rest of the school?
Actually, it's not. It's just a lower priority for getting repairs. It's all from the same era, from the 1990s or before. I don't know when the last time the HVAC in this campus was actually done because it wasn't done properly when we moved in. I've had long conversations with the building engineers. I mean, I love the guy. He's doing everything he can to help me find parts, but they're getting harder and harder to find. I mean, when they take apart another system at another school, he'll grab the parts that we think might work on ours,
Mm.
but we're running out of those spare parts.
That kind of sounds a little bit like what Councilmember Allen and I took a tour of one of the systems rooms at WMATA, and they have like work order tags that are like from like the 1970s, and they can't find the part. So there's just a tag of like, don't touch. So, you know,
There you go. Exactly.
yeah. Okay. Well, I appreciate you all testifying and bringing this up, and hopefully we can have some of these conversations. One of the things I often talk about with DGS is, you know, at what point is the tipping point where either through small capital projects or work orders, we're actually spending more money than just doing the modernization that is necessary and needed. And there is some discretion there because there are entire schools that have now been modernized that opened well after a Czech or a McKinley came back into the DCPS portfolio after that, that DCPS prioritized and has been completely redone, while we have some schools that either for complication or otherwise, we just haven't managed to get to. And that was the impetus for this legislation. But thank you all for your testimony today.
Thank you, Councilmember Henderson. Councilmember Fruman, are you here?
Sure, and thank you very much, Chairman Mendelson. We thank you very much to this panel. Mary, also great to see you. And I agree with you on the inefficiencies. This is a drum that I think we together have been banging on for quite some time. And it's bigger than just the facilities allocation because there's expenses associated with administration and maintenance that also figures into it. So totally agree on the problem. I'm curious what you see, how you get to a solution without being unduly disruptive and unfair. So yes, I see the problem. What do we do with identifying that problem?
I mean, I think we have to put it on the table and not in an ideological way. I think that there's been a lot of ideology around choice that hasn't really necessarily helped our kids. So I think looking at the problem together with the charter sector and trying to understand whether or not there are any kind of governance and policy changes. I mean, Matt, that I have, for a long time thought there ought to be a path back into the DCPS, kind of city system. And that we should have more alternative ways to kind of manage our programs. Many years ago, I remember reaching out to was Thurgood Marshall Academy and also DC Bilingual and saying, well, wouldn't you really want to be, you want to exist forever, right? For real. Wouldn't you like to come back into the DCPS system? And they said, yeah, but there's no path in, there's no way that we get to retain our program independence and some of the measures of accountability that they felt were important to their programs. So was this notion that somehow if you were in DCPS, you had to be, all standardized to a DCPS system. So to me, there are other ways to think about education management and education that we could be more creative on. And I think that we could be more creative and we could be getting more of the dollars to the kids who need it. We could get more dollars to the adults that are working with the kids. But I feel like we've got a really incredibly inefficient system that is mostly at the service of operators and not, and that would include DCPS in that one, not necessarily in prioritizing the kids and the adults that are actually in the classroom. So I think there are ways to do it. I think it's going to take policy change. I think it's going to take some, big boy pants on the part of a lot of people, but I think we could have a really interesting and productive dialogue about where to go in order to get our dollars to the kids.
Great, thank you, very helpful. I'd also say, I don't know that it's in the best interest of our taxpayers because we're not using our tax dollars.
Right.
There was a math issue and I looked at your table and I see that the way in which you got the $327 a square foot is you divided the total number of square feet by the total investment. So it's not got any connection to any single.
No, it's not. That's what I was explaining. Yeah.
But on another numbers issue, on maintenance, again, totally agree with you. Like, if we've spent all of this money to modernize these schools, the idea that we're not maintaining them in the way that we should is really irresponsible in so many ways to all of the same people who listed before. Is there an industry best practice? Is there something, is there a guide that we should measure ourselves against? Is there a dollars per square foot? How do we test what we're doing?
So there are some back of the envelope ways to look at budget, and what that is basically on for actual maintenance, not utilities, it's 2% of the replacement value of a building, right? So, but you can see what those are very sensitive to. If it's $600 a square foot, that time, let's say 100,000 square feet, you've got $60 million. You should be spending 2% of that 60 million on an annual basis for the maintenance of that facility. Now that includes the cleaning, the landscaping, the filters, oiling, calibrations. There's a lot of work in there, and DC has not been doing that. It's been coasting a bit on the fact that it was modernized, but what we know is that that's really not a smart thing to do, because you deteriorate your systems much quicker when you're not doing the appropriate maintenance.
So
yeah.
Has anybody done that analysis to see what percentage of replacement value we're investing in those categories of maintenance?
So I have done the 2%, but I'm not remembering it off the top of my head. One of the things that was interesting when I was looking at some of the data in prep for this hearing is the charter schools are actually spending a good bit more on a per square foot basis on maintenance and operations than the DCPS. And I think that, it could be the neglect on DCPS. It could be some efficiencies of DCPS with DGS doing it. It could be some, high cost of contracting out and privatization of all of the maintenance of charters. But frankly, the city, we need to be paying attention to this, because we've done an amazing job of getting capital dollars out the door, but we will absolutely lose their value if we don't maintain them properly.
Well, this is saying, I'll be back to you about this. I think doing a sophisticated analysis would be helpful as we think about budgets going forward.
And there is some good practice, out there, but it starts with planning. It starts with planning and staffing appropriately and training your staff to do the work that needs to be done. So,
Okay, Mr. Perkins, thank you for all of the work that you have done. I'm curious, what's a PACES-like program for small cap projects? Is it that there's a category of projects, HVAC, roofs, that then there's an inventory of where we stand? How would that work?
Well, thank you, Councilmember. So we do gather, data on the conditions of these assets, and DGS has that. It's part of the facility condition assessments. They are tracking the lifespan of these important systems, and so I would recommend again looking at what do we have on file to plug in where the modernization is more binary. Has happened or hasn't. But these are you could look at. Basically, where are the schools who have severe needs in particular systems? You could, again, sort of structure it around, including, again, elements around need and equity as the PACE Act does, but codify which building systems need to happen sooner. And again, just to be honest, it's completely opaque around how DGS and DCPS really, DCPS is the one who's driving the decision making here. How DCPS decides which projects get fixed first within the roofs pool or within their HVAC pool, and it's often a very small number of people who are involved in deciding that. And it's just they're managing dozens and dozens of projects all at once, and it's very important that be more transparent and have some system for deciding which happens first.
Okay, so there's the roofs pool, there's the HVAC pool. Are there other categories that you think is playgrounds? What other, if there were a small cap analysis, it would cover those two things. What else would it cover?
I don't recall the specific buckets in the budget book of where small capital dollars are structured, but within each bucket, perhaps you could imagine there being again some based on the available data of which roofs need to be fixed first, right? And I imagine that they're doing this. To be honest, again, it's not they're doing very hard work here and they're doing their best they can, but it's not clear from even just the council's perspective which things are, how they're structuring it, and which inputs are going into it.
Okay, really appreciate it. Rather than cheating and asking a question with 9 seconds left, I'm going to turn it back to Chairman Mendelson.
Thank you for not cheating. We frown on that. Yes, ma'am.
If possible, and if time allows, the students worked really hard on getting photos of the repairs needed and making us creating a statement. And if time allows, I would really appreciate if they could get their voices heard.
Well, I'm about to call them. I'm not sure how to get all 7 there, but we'll figure something out. I want to thank all the witnesses for your testimony. It's been very helpful. So everybody's excused. Serena Lee, Amina Collins, if you're here, come forward. Kennedy Estep, Konika Graves. Do you all want to maybe, I don't think I can fit too many extra chairs there, but maybe folks could speak if you have a statement and then give your seat to somebody else. Oren Cantarella and Giselle Flores, that's who I've got. So Serena Lee.
Okay. Good afternoon, DC Council members and members from DGS. My name is Serena Lin, and I'm a sophomore at Columbia Heights Education Campus. I'm here today to speak on the behalf of students who attend school in conditions that are unsafe and inaccessible. For clarification, we are in favor of the PACE Clarification Amendment Act of 2025. However, I believe Columbia Heights not included in the scorecard, and we would like to be included in the process for the well-being of our student school community. At my school, the stair treads and railings are loose and falling apart. This creates a hazard for students to walk up and down the floor levels. Our bathrooms frequently lack essential supplies such as toilet paper and menstrual products, which directly impact students' health and dignity. Door handles are often broken, so this makes rooms and bathrooms very difficult to access. In addition, we have issues with our elevator oftentimes, which poses a serious liability for teachers, students, or visitors who use wheelchairs or have mobility needs. There is also little to no additional security around our soccer field, raising concerns about student safety during practices and events. These are not minor inconveniences. They affect our ability to learn, our physical safety, and our sense of being valued by the system meant to support us. Broken infrastructure should not be normalized in a setting where students are supposed to thrive and learn. I'm asking the DC Council and DGS to prioritize timely repairs and to ensure consistent access to basic bathroom supplies, restore elevators, and improve safety measures on school grounds. I think our students deserve accountability, transparency, and some action. Please advise how Columbia Heights Education Campus can be included in the scorecard and how we can be prioritized for repairs. Thank you for your time and listening to the voices of students who live through these conditions every day.
Thank you. And is your last name L-I or L-I-N?
LIN.
Okay. And I don't have a copy of your statement if you want to provide that, which you can do after the hearing. Amina Collins?
Press the button. Okay. Good afternoon, members of the council. My name is Amina Collins, and I am a senior at Columbia Heights Education Campus, and I am also student government senior treasurer. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. Most of the conversation around the school renovations has already focused on the inside of our building, so I want to speak on the conditions outside and the system that affects whether those spaces receive funding. At Columbia Heights Education Campus, our outdoor facilities do not reflect the needs of our students. One major issue is a lack of bathrooms on or near our fields. Our school is surrounded by busy streets with constant traffic. When students leave the field to use the bathroom, they have to walk around the building near moving cars, buses, and pedestrians. This creates a safety risk that could be avoided if bathrooms were built directly on the field. Another issue is the size of our field. Our field is not a full 100 yards, which prevents it from being used as a regulation football field. Because of this, our teams are limited in how they can practice and compete, and we are often unable to host games at our own school. These problems are not because students do not care and because our school lacks effort. They are the results of systems where funding decisions move slowly, rely on strict categories, and often prioritize some schools over others. Schools like ours can wait years for outdoor improvements because field spaces, athletic facilities, and surrounding infrastructure are not always treated as urgent needs. There are realistic solutions that could be explored, such as adjusting the softball field or expanding the field towards Hyatt Street. What we need most is flexibility in the funding process and recognition that student safety and opportunity extends beyond the classroom walls. Investing in our outdoor spaces will show that the system can work for students, not against them. Columbia Heights education students deserve safe, functional spaces where we can grow, compete, and represent our school with pride. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Kennedy Eastep?
Hi, everyone. My name is Kennedy Eastep. Our school could benefit from stronger pest control measures, including sealing the holes that the pests may be entering through. It is very difficult to focus and learn when rodents are running through the classroom, and in my personal experience, they have eaten plants that were a part of a very important assignment. There was also an occasion where rodents were in the concession stand while me and my SGA members were selling. This has stopped us from being able to raise money for our school. Much of our furniture, like our desks, chairs, and common area seating, is outdated and uncomfortable, making it harder for students to focus and engage in learning. Lastly, investing in these renovations is an investment in students. A safe, accessible, and modern school environment, supports academic success, school pride, and overall well-being. Thank you for your time, consideration, and commitment to the DCPS students.
Thank you. And are you saying that you've actually, like you were in a concession stand and there was a rodent present at the same time?
I've also seen in an auditorium.
Quanika Graves.
Good afternoon, members of the council and DGS. My name is Quanika Graves, and I'm a current senior at Chet. To be clear, we're not asking for a completely new school building. What we're asking for are necessary renovations that allow our current building to be safe, comfortable, and effective to serve more students for years to come. Many parts of our interior infrastructure are outdated and worn. Our stairs and ceilings show visible signs of age, which raises safety and maintenance concerns. The things mentioned are outdated and often unreliable and do not reflect the standards students should experience in learning environments. Our cafeteria model could also benefit greatly from renovations. An improved layout and updated designs would allow for better flow, cleanliness, and a more welcoming space for students during the day. Similarly, concession stand areas, if updated, could support school events and student activities. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Lauren Cantarella.
Hello. My name is Oren Canarella, but my legal name is Irie Canarella. I, Irie Canarella, am a sophomore at Columbia Heights Educational Campus and vice president of SGA. Mine is very short, but it's things that I've seen like daily. DC Council and Department of General Services. We students of Columbia Heights Educational Campus are interested in fixing some aspects of our school. Our stair treads are broken and students can trip over them. Those door locks in our bathroom stalls tend to not even be there half of the time, and both of these are safety and sanitary problems. For clarification, we are in favor of the PACE Clarification Amendment Act of 2025. However, I believe Columbia Heights Educational Campus is not included in the scorecard, and we would like to be included in the process for the well-being of our school community. Please advise how Columbia Heights Education Campus can be included in the scorecard and how to be prioritized. Thank you.
Thank you. And then I have last Giselle Flores is okay. Let me say a couple of things. First of all, great statements, but I don't have copies of any of them. If you want them included in the record, then you have to give them to us. And one of my staff people will collect them from you if you want to give them to us after the hearing. The second thing I want to note is, well, the reason why we're having this hearing is because of Councilmember Henderson's legislation, as well as it's an opportunity for us to just do oversight with regard to how the PACE Act is being implemented. The council is not responsible for maintenance. So if things aren't getting fixed, trust me, we get pretty frustrated too, because we contact DGS and the process, at least as far as I'm concerned, is mystifying why they are not fixing things quickly or everything or efficiently. But in any event, it's not the council that does repairs. But it's not the council that decides what gets repaired. We do oversight, and then we have this legislation, which among other things would have the effect of putting check on the list. I don't know high or low on the list, but would put you on the list. I think I'll leave it there. Turn to my colleague, Councilmember Henderson.
Thank you. Thank you to this group of students. I used to do SGA. It is a great development tool for leadership development, but also thank you guys for taking time to advocate on behalf of your classmates. I'm going to ask just some clarifying questions because it seems like some of the things that you all were talking about, whether it be the field, the railings, the tread, locks in the bathroom, those all seem like work order maintenance type of request and not necessarily full on capital projects, except for there might be some other things that are going on that you haven't mentioned. So for example, is the school, in your opinion, experiencing like heating and cooling issues in terms of the HVAC system? None of you brought that up, but I'm curious.
Yes, I noticed that it's like no insulation in our windows. Like when I was in first period this morning, I sat by a window and it was freezing cold and it made the whole classroom cold. It's like no temperature control.
No temperature control.
As you get higher, like if you go on the fourth floor, it may be a little warm, but it's still not as warm as we would like it to be. Like we still have to wear jackets and hoodies while we're
Okay, all right. Then
Yeah, can I say something?
no, oh yeah, I'm gonna let the ones who experience it daily give some feedback. Yes.
I noticed that when I go into different rooms, it's like very different, like humidity levels or like whether it's hot or cold. I noticed that like the rooms vary a lot.
Okay.
And I've noticed like sometimes I just have to take off my jacket in some places, and sometimes I have to like borrow other people's jackets sometimes. It's just like very different in each room, in my opinion.
Okay. All right. So that's a structural change, right? The HVAC system is within the walls. That's not cosmetic, but that's an actual structural issue. Another question. You brought up rodents and we're going to put that to the side because that's also, it can be a maintenance issue, but I think you testified, it could be some holes that have been left open where rodents have now used that to access the school. And so that's something that could be, that addressed there. How's the Wi-Fi in the building?
Yes, that's what I wanted to talk about.
Okay.
The connectors to the Wi-Fi boxes that are supposed to be in each room, some of them aren't even on. So this guy from the school told me about like how it works, and basically one of those boxes are in each room and some of them aren't on, so the people in that classroom have to connect to other people's Wi-Fis. And a lot of times we don't have enough computers and we have to go over to another people's classrooms for more computers. But yeah, for the Wi-Fi boxes, a lot of the times they're off. I think it's mostly on the fourth floor, but yeah.
Okay. All right. So we talked about that. Beyond locks in the bathrooms, are there issues in terms of some stalls just not being operational, which we know that we've had at other schools where there's just like a trash bag over the toilet type of thing?
Yes, like on the middle school side, I think like on the second floor is only 2 functional stalls. Like there'll be a trash can on top of the toilet. And I know there are other bathrooms in the building that only have like a few functional stalls because the other ones are broken down.
Okay, so hopefully someone from the Committee on Facilities is listening, which they have oversight over DGS. But if not, we can certainly follow up with DGS around the work orders that currently in the system, because some of these things don't take a large modernization. We already have plumbers, we have locksmiths, we have folks who can address some of these issues. Now, some of the structural things, whether it be HVAC and otherwise, that does require a capital investment for us to get on that. But then we have to kind of know, right, to plan ahead. In the same vein as you guys probably wouldn't know how old the boiler was at Check, but probably given some of the comments that you've made, the boiler probably is about to reach its lifespan as well, and we need to make an investment on that. But this is super helpful because we don't have the opportunity to be in your school buildings every day. So that you all raising this definitely elevates the issue. And so hopefully we can address at least some of this before some of you graduating seniors head out to college. But thank you so much for your testimony and for your advocacy on behalf of your classmates.
Don't get up. Councilmember Fruman, are you still here?
I am. I don't have any questions for this panel. Thank you very much for your testimony. It is super helpful to get the specifics from folks on the phone.
Thank you. So now you can get up. You're excused. I think Bijan's going to come down if you have your statements to give him. Thank you all very much. We're going to turn now to the government, and we have 2 witnesses, Patrick Ashley, who's Deputy Chancellor, Finance and Operations at DC Public Schools, and Osei Headley, Deputy Director, Department of General Services, Capital Construction Services Division. Mr. Headley, did I pronounce your name correctly?
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. Thank you.
So I have a statement from Mr. Ashley, but not a statement from Mr. Headley. That's correct?
That's correct.
And you're ready, Mr. Ashley? And good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chairman. Good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson and council members. I'm Dr. Patrick Ashley, Deputy Chancellor for Finance and Operations at the District of Columbia Public Schools. In my role, I supervise and support our facilities planning and design work in close collaboration with our partners at the Department of General Services. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I also want to thank our students and families for their testimony. As Mayor Bowser has said, we are a city that believes in and invests in public education. The fiscal year 2026 budget includes $525 million in capital investments to improve and modernize DCPS school buildings. This year's budget builds on sustained investments in DCPS capital projects throughout Mayor Bowser's tenure. Since 2015, we have modernized 50 school buildings, and we continue to move forward with modernization projects each year. Recently, projects were completed at Adams Education Campus and Truesdale Elementary School, with additions or expansions at Stoddard Elementary School, MacArthur High School, and Lucky Education Campus. This year, we'll complete projects at J.L. Wilson Elementary School, Malcolm X Elementary School, Thomas Elementary School, and Tubman Elementary School. By 2030, DCPS will have modernized or have plans to modernize 24 of the 34 schools currently on the PACE list. The Planning Actively for Comprehensive Education Facilities Amendment Act of 2016, or PACE, provides a framework for determining which schools should be prioritized for modernization. PACE outlines specific criteria for DCPS to use when prioritizing a school for modernizations. Those criteria include 1, facility condition, which is the amount spent to modernize a facility when it was spent in the current condition of the facility. Next, demand, the degree to which enrollment in the school is growing and how well utilized the building is. Next, community need, which is the number of children that live within the school boundary and the projected number that will live there in the future. And finally, equity, the amount of construction that has occurred in the feeder pattern and the number of at-risk students enrolled in the school. Under the law, every 5 years, DCPS and government partners score schools on these criteria to determine the order in which they should be modernized. When prioritizing projects in 2017 and 2022, DCPS included schools that had not received a recent modernization or schools that had only received a Phase 1 modernization. Phase 1 modernizations only focused on core academic spaces like classrooms, but often did not renovate gyms, cafeterias, bathroom, or building systems. The PACE Clarification Amendment Act of 2025 would require 2 items from DCPS. First, it would require prioritization scores from all DCPS schools, not just a subset. Second, it would require a DCPS to work with other agencies to provide a resource on historic buildings and designations for the public. DCPS supports the requirements to prioritize all schools as long as sufficient resources are available. By including all schools, the council and the public can have a complete picture of how DCPS will prioritize major capital construction in the future. While not included in this bill, we do not want to see projects currently in the capital improvement plans removed if their prioritization score changes. DCPS partially supports the requirement to provide a resource on historic buildings. While DCPS can continue to providing the public with such a resource, we will need to work with government partners to develop it. DCPS does not possess the necessary authority or expertise on this topic to be the lead agency responsible. DCPS works closely with the Office of Planning to follow the district's historic preservation laws. I also want to take this opportunity to clarify that the district's historic preservation laws do not influence when a school is modernized. As I said in the beginning of my testimony, under Mayor Bowser's leadership, we have invested significant resources to modernize our school. A modern and safe learning environment is critical for student success, and we are proud to have modernized 50 school buildings since 2015. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Ashley. A couple questions from your statement, and then I have some other questions. Why do you say we do not want to see projects currently in the capital improvements plan removed if their prioritization score changes?
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize part of the reason that the PACE Act was established was really to allow for predictability. And so to have school communities to understand when their school was going to be modernized. The capital improvement plan is a very public document where we have said your school is coming up for modernization. Families make choices based on modernization decisions. And so we know that, we have now signaled that the facility is going to be modernized, and we want to provide stability to that process. And so we know that there may be some slight changes. We saw some slight changes from 2017 to 2022. And so we don't want to provide any upset within, the list of what is going to be modernized, so that families can have a predictable experience.
You said you saw slight changes from 2017 to 2022.
Sure.
Meaning some schools might have gone down in priority?
Correct. That's correct. So again, one of the criteria that I laid out is utilization. And so we see enrollment go up and down. And so we know that, we'll see the same thing when we recalculate, that some of these criterias or FCAs or other factors which are variable may have changed over time. And so we do expect, without having the data and having run this, that there may be some changes in those investments.
So in 2022, was that your approach? Was it schools that were ranked didn't go down in their ranking?
I don't know.
Shouldn't put it that way. The schools that were in the CIP weren't removed from the CIP as a result of the 2022 changes?
That was, from my understanding, I wasn't here in 2022, but my understanding those projects were not removed. The other piece of that is, the other piece of importance about the capital improvement plan is we have a 4-year construction process. We have 2 years of design, 2 years of construction. And so in some of those projects, which may come online in 2030, we've already started some of that investment as well.
So what if, as a result of this bill before us, it turns out there was a school that went through the Army Corps renovation, is in really bad condition,
Sure.
and really ought to be the next school to be renovated, but you've already got 4 on the list for next year.
Sure.
I know my timing's off a little.
Yeah.
So what would you do then? Just add another school, or because you can't, or you would just take the one that's in really, really horrible condition that really, really, really ought to be the next school and just make it wait?
Yeah, it's a great hypothetical without having the data in front of me. I think it really depends on resources and availability. As you know, from the PACE Act, we often aren't able to necessarily follow everything in sequential order, depending on swing spaces, depending on school needs. Ideally, if we had unlimited resources, we would absolutely prioritize that and bring that into the fold as quickly as possible.
So say more about this issue of the bill requiring DCPS to provide a resource on historic buildings. What does that mean, a resource?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't write the bill, so our understanding of it is really, we've had a lot of conversations with the community. Many times we hear from the community regarding, desires that they want with the building, and sometimes that is has some conversations about the historical significance of the building. And as I mentioned in my testimony, the historic preservation aspects of a building don't impact when it is modernized, but sometimes we do see that it does impact certain design criterias. And so from my understanding of the bill is really to help the community understand when a building is historic and what those criteria would be in terms of the design.
So this isn't about historic preservation being an impediment, and you're saying it's not an impediment.
Correct.
This is just about, as you understand it, I'll say education for the public.
I think so. I mean, I think it's also, there's sometimes questions. We have 130 school buildings, or about 130 school buildings, and many times, right, what is determined to be historic is, depending on which agency that we're talking to, and so it would be a resource to be able to identify some of that in advance.
Recently, my office has been contacted by, I think it's 2 schools that they're being told that some changes can't be made because of historic preservation. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about?
If I had to guess, I would probably know which schools those are. But I think more broadly, we hear, a lot of, so we do a lot of engagement with the community with regards to what individuals want, what the community wants in a school building. And we balance that based on the resources that we have and based on the conditions that we find in that school building. And sometimes the desires don't necessarily align fully with the realities that we see on the ground. And so sometimes, we see school communities that want to raise an entire building down to the ground. And we've made conscious decisions with our partners at DGS not to completely demolish a building, not because it's not because of the historical aspects, but because it's a good use of resources. And so one of the buildings in which that you may have received some advocacy, we know that that building has a really strong structure that can be used for that. And we can both be environmentally friendly in terms of not putting more materials in the landfill. We can create a high quality education space, and we can also save $20 million by not raising that portion of the building. That sometimes is conflated with being the fact that that part of the building is older. And so sometimes when we say no, that we're not going to tear down that portion of the building, it gets conflated as being because it is historic. It's not because it is not historic or is not historic. It's because of the other reasons I just talked about.
So the two schools I know of are Whittier and Chisholm.
Those are the same schools I'm talking about. Yep.
And your understanding is that historic preservation is not the impediment. It's other design, cost, programmatic considerations.
Absolutely. And I think also being good stewards of resources, and that does not just financial resources, that's about not putting additional waste in landfills as well. I think the other common misperception that we have and a great opportunity to clarify is that when we reuse portions of buildings, we're essentially gutting the building down to the studs, right? So the mechanical systems that existed before, those all go away. There's brand new HVAC, there's brand new electrical, but the shell of the building is still in a condition in which that we can be responsible users and be able to reuse that portion of the building. I think sometimes people think that, the air conditioning that gave problems before is still going to be there. That's not the case.
Now, I have a question here, which I think is at odds with the testimony. Why has DCPS not calculated a prioritization ranking for all schools every 5 years?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think, again, I wasn't here in 2017 and 2022. I think the desire at the time, as I understand it, was, really to understand and provide prioritizations to schools that had received no modernizations at the time. And I think that was just a subjective way to make sure that we were advancing those schools that needed the work the most. I think regardless of whether this bill existed today, we would be prioritizing all of our portfolio in this upcoming PACE Act.
So I sort of misread the question. The question was about all schools, and I get that the evaluations in the past have not addressed all schools, which is what this bill is about.
Yep.
Does DCPS collect facility condition assessment data on all of its facilities, including those considered vacant or significantly underused?
So DGS is responsible for the facility condition assessment, so I'll turn to my partner here.
Good afternoon, council members. DGS does perform FCAs on a majority of the schools to date.
Majority, but not all.
Not all. We're working through a list right now. We have to date about 80% of FCAs that are less than 5 years old for the DCPS portfolio. And based on resource, we work through the list based on age of the latest FCA report. There are about 20 schools, plus or minus 20 schools, that have not received an FCA within the last 5 years, and those would be prioritized in 2026.
20 schools or 20%? 20 schools?
20, roughly 20 schools.
But that's within the last 5 years.
That's right.
How about not at all?
There are a few schools that perhaps may not have received an FCA because it was removed from the DCPS set of schools, and or they're currently under construction or slated for construction. So they may not receive a report only because, like I said, we're proposing renovations or currently under renovations.
This weekend I was in the Hillcrest community, and somebody came up to me and said that Winston which has not been used as a school for a number of years, is open to, I don't know if I want to say the public, but it's open. It's not secured. Is that a building that would have a facility condition assessment?
I do not have that one on my list, but I will check with my team and circle back.
Okay. Well, so I guess there are two questions. One is, does it have a facility condition assessment? And if it doesn't, why not? And the second is, will you make sure that it's secured?
Absolutely.
And that should happen quickly. And when it gets secured, also probably there should be a check to make sure there's no squatters in the building or damage that's been done.
Chairman, just a point of clarity, Winston is not in the DCPS portfolio, so that is not one of our schools.
It's not?
It is not in the DCPS portfolio.
Even though a couple of years ago, the mayor proposed renovating it as a school.
It's in the city's portfolio. It is not in DCPS's portfolio.
Okay. Well, would there be a facilities condition assessment on a building that's not in DCPS's portfolio?
Council member, I would imagine that's the reason why it's not on my list. I would double check to see. I'm sure priorities are for the schools that are being occupied and the schools that are currently on DCPS's roster. But I will double check and see why that one was not, and get back at you.
Well, I probably don't fully understand the facilities condition assessment, and that's not where I'm going with the question, but it would seem to me DGS should be checking all of these buildings frequently enough that if it is correct that it's not secured, the DGS would catch that and make sure that it's not being destroyed unintentionally.
And we do, council members. I mean, we do have our facilities team that goes around and check in schools, checking all of the vacant buildings that we know that are within our portfolios, but sometimes we may miss one. Or sometimes they may be slated for renovation or construction. For instance, the Fletcher Johnson campus, that's a school that's was slated for construction. We actually began demolition recently. And so that was one of the schools within our portfolio that did experience some vandalism. And it was just in a time frame that was unfortunate, that it was in between our rounds and also the start of construction.
Right, maybe the rounds aren't frequent enough. I don't know. When you get back to me on Winston, let me know the full story. Why you don't do a facilities condition assessment on it, when the last time was it was checked, whether in fact it is not secure, why it is that happened, and why it takes a council hearing for that to come to your attention as opposed to DGS figuring that out on its own. Councilmember Freeman, do you have any questions?
Thank you very much, Chairman Mendelson. Yes, I do have some questions. I had for some time have tried to figure out what are all the schools that have yet to be touched by full modernization. And I think the update probably gives me that list in a sense. But Mr. Ashley, I'm going to run down the ones that I think have phase ones, but not full modernizations. Johnson, Langdon, Military Road School, Payne, Peabody, Ludlow Taylor, and Ross. And then in terms of Army Corps, but not a full modernization, I see Cleveland, Bell, Lincoln, Brightwood, Kelly Miller, Key, Luke Seymour, McKinley, Minor, Noyes, and Patterson. And so it looks like between 15 and 20 schools in the full portfolio that have yet to see a full modernization and are not in the current CIP. Is that the scale of what we're talking about here?
Councilmember Fruman, thanks for the question. I didn't catch all of those, so happy to follow up with you on that, but it sounds accurate. It's in the appendix as well.
Okay. And so, and we're never done, right? But before when you were talking about prioritization, one of the things that you were talking about prioritization is getting to the ones that have not benefited from a full modernization yet. We're getting close if it's between 15 and 20 that have yet to be done.
Well, I think Chairman, excuse me, Councilmember, just a point of clarification. So we have about 130 school buildings. And so what's in the PACE list right now is 34. We've done about 50 schools since 2015. And so, there are a number of schools that still have not been done.
That have still not been done, not gotten a full modernization.
Correct. Yes.
But do you know what that number is?
I don't off the top of my head. I can follow up with you.
But is it in the 15 to 20 kind of range, or you think it's significantly higher than that?
I believe you're correct. Let me
Okay.
follow up.
Okay, and I get it that there could be variations in the conditions in those places, and it may be that they've gotten a number of things and they've been fixed up pretty well. And so something else that already had a full modernization's conditions could have deteriorated enough that they would jump in front of them in the queue. But presumptively, I'd like to see us get done so that we have touched given every school in the portfolio of full modernizations. And maybe I'll follow up with you about how long you think it will take to get there. Once we're done with that, we're never done, but we're in this world of maintenance that Mary Filardo was talking about. Or DGS goes from being the biggest construction company around to being the biggest maintenance company around. And how are you all thinking about investment in maintenance? And maybe this is for the representative of DGS. Ms. Filardo talked about 2% of replacement costs being a kind of industry standard. How do you all think we're doing in terms of funding maintenance? And at what percentage of replacement costs do you think we're funding maintenance at this point?
So my purview is over capital construction. So I don't have all of the figures and facts for maintenance, but I would say that our maintenance team are doing a very good job of reducing the number of work orders. They've been working tirelessly over the past couple of years, and that number has been trending down. I would say that, can it be done better? Yes, with additional resources, I think we can make a farther dent on maintenance, and that is for the smaller ticket items, door knobs, door handles, the everyday items that are being overly used and that are plaguing most of our facilities. Long-term planning, I think we do a pretty decent job at that. We work with our FCA to determine what projects coming down the pipeline would need a HVAC replacement and maybe perhaps roof. We also do that in collaboration with DCPS. We work with our partners at DCPS to prioritize which of the schools would need a major capital, small cap rather, upgrade. So
on the small cap question, thank you very much, because that's where I was going next, and so you gave me the perfect segue. And this goes to both DCPS and DGS. You heard Will Perkins talk about a PACE Act-like approach to small capital projects, HVAC and roofs. How do you do it now and how does it compare to the PACE Act? Because part of what Mr. Perkins was saying was he thinks that there's a careful prioritization, but it's in a back room amongst a small group of people. How are you sorting through where the small cap projects need to happen and happen the most?
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad Will brought up that issue. We think about small capital projects and sort of three different buckets, right? One is really about emergencies, right? And so we didn't know that an HVAC system was going to completely fail. And so we provide, some money every year in the budget to do major capital improvements for emergencies. And then we think about the next bucket of funds within our small capital portfolio is really stabilization. And so we know that we do roof assessments with our partners at DGS to understand where the life expectancy of the roof is. And so we know within the next 5 years, we need to replace these roofs or these windows or whatnot. And then we also think about, enhancements where we know that either the school programming has changed where we need to change, the layout of a building, or we need to add modulars to deal with temporarily enrollment swings or things like that. All of those are all small capital projects and really get prioritized in different ways. Obviously, emergencies, we don't know which emergencies are going to happen. And so those are really just set aside for time of. But we do prioritization in a very similar fashion with regards to the PACE Act, where we think about need and equity and the investment in our students. And so a lot of that work is happening, just not necessarily codified in the same way in legislation. And every year, right, depending on the year, there may be priorities that rise to the top. So one of the things that we've done before is also prioritize some of those programmatic enhancements, such as athletics, right? And so we provide a little bit more priority that year, but certainly happy to continue to have the conversation about how we prioritize those.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how to capture this formally, but even if it were, it's in the stabilization bucket that I think the most questions would arise. Other things have the explanation appears on its face, but in the stabilization, and there could be a listing, for example, of roofs with less than 5 years life on them, and then there's some kind of an explanation of how you chose amongst them to put them into the queue. And all to say, Will said a couple of things. One of the things he said was he thought you were doing it in a way that made sense, but we didn't have visibility into it. And getting some visibility into what your practice is in that space, I think would be helpful. A different topic that, yep.
I was going to say to add to that, we do work with an outside vendor, one of our partners, to create that set list of roof assessments. It's something that we do year over year. There is a list out there of all of the roofs, not only DCPS, but for all of the government assets, and they're ranked in terms of age, in terms of what's under warranty, what's out of warranty, what needs to be replaced. So there is such a list that we do go through and take a look at, and we do work with our client agencies to determine whether or not if there's a modernization that's scheduled for a year out, 2 years out, we may prolong replacing that roof until the modernization kicks in, or if there's no modernization schedule, we may just move forward with that roof replacement. Same thing with HVAC systems. So there is behind the scenes, and at DGS, we do have a process that we go through to determine that.
Okay, so I hear you. I don't know whether or not those are things that are provided with pre-hearing oversight questions or such, but it seems like getting transparency into that would be helpful. I left 13 seconds on and didn't ask one last question, but can I ask one last question this time and then I'll get out of your hair for the day?
With that deal, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. So a different thing that Scott Goldstein brought up was the idea of doing an assessment of outdoor spaces. And I wondered, are you doing an assessment of outdoor spaces? In some cases, I think, there may not be place to add an outdoor learning space In other places, it may be that the conditions are not appropriate, but what kind of inventory are the two agencies doing to determine where the needs are for outdoor learning and a prioritization for trying to achieve?
Yeah, thanks, council member, for the question. I think outdoor space, just to say, is really important to us. And it's something that is built within our ed spec, and it's something that we have lots of conversations with the community about. We often don't have the opportunity to really sort of reimagine outdoor spaces sort of fully until we're in a full modernization. But it is part of the process that we do in our small capital projects when we can, thinking about how we're making sure that there's outdoor spaces. I was at a site walk this morning and we were looking specifically at the outdoor space and making sure that it's suitable. As you mentioned, every site within the city is very different, but it is something that we do prioritize.
I mean, I do think to the extent it comes up in a full modernization, there's not going to be that many more full modernizations. And there's a whole bunch of places that were modernized at a time where the emphasis might not have been on outdoor space and outdoor learning space. So some sort of an inventory of where are we and where are the needs, I think would be healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the feedback.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Henderson.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you guys for being here. I want to start with a conversation about the Army Corps schools, as we refer to them. What's the relationship that DCPS and DGS currently has with the Army Corps of Engineers?
I'm not aware of a relationship that we have outside of the broader government, but not with regards to modernizations.
Okay.
Same, we currently do not have any active relationship with them.
Okay.
or
All right.
projects.
In terms of looking back at the schools for whom received some work from the Army Corps of Engineers done in the early 2000s, how many schools are we talking about in the quote unquote Army Corps portfolio? Just so we're all talking from the same set of data.
So we have 12 Army Corps that have not received a modernization.
Okay, you said that has not received a modernization. So there are some other Army Corps schools for whom have received modernizations.
I mean, different folks build different buildings over the entire amount of time. And so when we do a full modernization, I don't know if we necessarily consider that to be an Army Corps anymore. It depends on what your definition is, because at a certain point, a full modernization done last year of an Army Corps engineer, we would no longer consider that an Army Corps school.
Okay, and based on your view today, how would you characterize the general state of those schools?
You know, I think there's a GAO report about Army Corps modernization projects. And so I think that speaks for itself. I think there's a lot of challenges with Army Corps modernizations. We see different, building techniques that we wouldn't have used, different ways that they did engagement that may not have engaged the community in really thinking about a student-focused design. So, I mean, it is a priority for us to be able to modernize those facilities to make sure that we have high-quality educational facilities.
Okay, have you guys ever done an analysis looking at how much DGS/DCPS has spent on either small capital projects, just for those 12 schools? Because I think the general tipping point has always been, at what point are we just lighting money on fire, doing work that you're going to have to redo, right? So you're putting on a new roof, but the rest of the school's still going to have to get done one day, or we decide to do a new boiler, but the whole rest, the HVAC is going to happen. You see what I'm saying? Like we're basically creating a patchwork system when in fact it probably would be cheaper for us to just go through the process to do it accurately.
I would say that, and again, not being over FMD, I don't have all of the data, but just generally, as I've seen it from and hearing from my colleagues, that we generally receive the same amount, more or less, of work orders from the Army Corps schools or as we see with our other schools.
Okay.
The big outlier, though, however, and we all know this, is for the most part, some of them have HVAC issues that are systemic, And so replacing those come at a pretty decent clip and cost. Most of those schools are nearing about 20 years at this point. So naturally, they'll be entering into a phase where the HVAC systems are at their end of life cycle. So you'll see that more and more as the projects or as the buildings get to that 20-year mark. So it's sort of hard sometimes, well, at least right now, as we get into that 20-year mark, to decipher, well, is it because of the school that was and the inherent or the latent defects that we've been seeing, or are these systems at their end of useful life right now? And so, but to go back to your specific question about the cost, we have not been tracking costs between Army Corps and our other schools separately, so we wouldn't have that data available to compare.
I mean, I think in a time of where quote unquote budgets are tight, I think we have to sort of look at this, right? Because if over the last 10 years we've spent enough money that it would have just like we could have modernized the school, that would have solved some of the things. And I think this discussion around some of the Army Corps schools is the reason why I introduced the legislation that we have before us today, is because the original intent of PACE was to create an unbiased metric to measure all of the schools. And then somehow this group of schools just didn't make it. And to that group, let's just ask for the record, is there opposition to you all including these group of schools in future calculations?
Yeah, Councilmember, I think you're out of the room, but I said earlier, even if it was not for this legislation, we would be including all schools in the PACE Act, right? There is some fundamental questions about if we modernized a school last year, right? If we should be including that. And I think that was some of the logic that went into the calculation in 2017 and 2022. But again, without it, we were planning on including all of the schools, holistically.
I think also it's not just about the list, but also having a historical record. I don't know if you heard what I said earlier, right? When we were doing this, 21st Century School Fund was the repository of much of the information and data about DC schools, which is crazy because they're not a government agency. But when we go to DGS, because DGS was new, they didn't have it. If we went to DCPS, oh, well, that used to be this Office of Public Education Facilities that used to be within the Deputy Mayor for Education's office, but that doesn't exist. And so nobody had a full record. I think by doing the annual facility condition assessments, right? Now we know that is with DGS, and DGS will have those, but also doing these every few year full recalculations, it provides a historic knowledge base so that we don't have to guess. We can kind of know what is the definitive truth of when is the last time this school has been touched, and then kind of go from there. So it is good to hear. And I just want to express to the school communities who are in that group, this doesn't mean you're going into the CIP next year. PACE was two-parter. It was one, unbiased metric, but two, to provide some stability within the CIP process, which literally the CIP changed every year pre-PACE. Even in the cases where there was clearly not even enough money to hire an architect, but because some council member from some particular ward was able to scrape together enough dollars, it was like, woohoo, we made it, even though you didn't make it because he gave you $500,000 and that was it. Let me ask, in terms of historic preservation, has this been a barrier in our modernization processes? Working with the Office of Historic Preservation or the Historic Preservation Review Board?
No, I mean, I think, the historic preservation is interesting, and there's a lot of misperceptions about historic preservation. I think historic preservation has not been a barrier towards modernization and who gets modernized and when they get modernized. And so I think that's something that is a common misperception. The other thing that we have a common misperception about with historic preservation is when does it make sense to completely tear down a building, and when does it make sense to reuse a building? And that often gets conflated with historic preservation, right? And so we want to make sure that we're designing buildings and good stewards of resources, not just financial resources, but making sure that we're not putting perfectly good buildings in the landfill. and balancing, to making sure that we have high quality education, facilities for our students. And so we also know that we also want buildings to fit within the fabric of the community and what the community wants. We have a community of scholars, and then we also have the community in which that the school building also lives in, and sometimes those are at odds with each other. We also know that there are differences in design tastes and things that school communities want, and so we work really closely with the Historic Preservation Office and the other bodies that have something to do with historic preservation to try and find that balance.
Yeah.
We also know that we have to meet in the middle and we have to make compromise. And sometimes we hear from community members that that decision wouldn't have been what they would have made, but it's all about how do we do the best with what we can,
Yeah.
fitting in with the fabric of the community.
Yeah, I don't like this idea from some community members that unless DCPS, DGS completely tears down a school, then the modernization was not as good. I've seen some excellent modernization of buildings where we start with a strong structure and are able to sort of build around it. And then there are some schools where yeah, we just got to let it go because
We agree.
it just wasn't going to work. It just was not going to work. Or we would have spent more money trying to make it work to save a couple of bricks as opposed to just tearing it down and starting over.
And Councilmember Herman, if I may, I think I just would say this again. Many times the other part that is confused about saving portions of buildings is that all the mechanical systems will remain, and so people have frustrations with gas leaks or air conditioning issues of the past. When we keep portions of a building, all of those mechanical systems go away, right? It is all new interior. It's essentially renovating down to the studs, right? Sometimes if you talk about home building, renovating down to the studs, that's what we're doing. We're keeping the shell, but everything else changes.
I know HGTV has made everybody a renovation expert and everybody desires shiplap in the classroom now. Shiplap? Do you watch HGTV? Oh, that's a Magnolia network type.
I'm too busy with education hearings. Do you have any more questions right now?
I do. Just a couple more and then
go for it.
and that can be done. Okay. In terms of historic preservation, if I were to ask you today, do y'all have an inventory? What would you say?
I would say we know some buildings are historic. We don't have a comprehensive historic inventory. And I think, we were talking about this as a team earlier, is that what is historic today in 20 years from now, HPO and the other partners may have a different analysis of what that is, right? Because the older a building gets, the more historic it becomes. But we don't have a comprehensive inventory of all of our 130 buildings and sort of where they stand.
Okay.
And I would just add also that, and to echo my colleague's earlier point, we do have a very good relationship with HBO. We meet with them quarterly
Okay.
to discuss upcoming projects, to gain their feedback, their buy-in. And I'm sure somewhere on their end, they may have a list, but they do come prepared to each and every of our meetings, ready to work with us on whatever the challenges is for that particular project.
Okay.
So.
I think some of the historic pieces of some of our buildings are just very unique and interesting to just the story of our schools in general. And in some ways, it could help explain to some community members who may be more recent arrivals as to the complexity of a particular project. I don't know how many people know that technically in Sousa Middle School, there are technically two school facilities that exist in that building. Most people don't realize that there's a whole other school when you go down into the basement. That increases not only the complexity of that project when we get to it, but it will also most certainly increase the cost of that particular project in terms of, what it says sort of on the outliers. I'm realizing that neither of you are from the DME's office, so I can't ask the question about the recommendation on the master facilities plan. Or maybe I can. You all work on the master facilities plan, yes? DGS?
Not.
No?
We provide input, but we do not do it. So.
Okay. Alrighty. Are there any other issues that have arisen in terms of adjustments needing to be made to PACE?
I don't think so. I mean, we appreciate within PACE, right, the flexibility to understand that real world conditions change in terms of swing space. And so we appreciate that flexibility within the law. There's some other recommendations, obviously that have been made, but I don't think we have any challenges.
Okay, this gives a good ability for me to ask a question about the swing space coming online in Ward 8. Are we going to be able to use that this summer? Or are we currently using it?
Which swing space?
Oh, what's it called? Magogny?
Oh, Macogny is already in use,
It's already in use,
right? Right?
right?
Yeah, it's already, yeah. Yes, it is in use. King Elementary is there. Took me a second. We are bringing on another swing space I was at this morning, which is the old DC Prep on V Street. And that's also coming online this summer as
On
well.
the old DC prep on.
Over by Big Chair area, Anacostia.
Oh, yeah.
So we do have another facility coming online as well.
Okay. Okay. There's a question for, well, no, I'm not even gonna go there because it's okay. I'm good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilmember. Talking about swing space, my understanding is that DCPS used to have tentative swing space plans in its annual CIP supplement, and it doesn't any longer. Is that correct?
So within the PACE supplement, we do include information about whether it be an on-site or off-site swing, but not the specific location. We provide the specific location 18 months in advance of the swing. Just there's a number of factors that go into swing as well. And so doing a long-term swing plan is very, very challenging for us.
Long term, but you said within 18 months, you have a pretty good idea of what the swing will be.
Within 18 months, we notify schools.
So is that in the CIP supplement?
It is not, it is in the PACE supplement for those schools that have already been identified.
So what's changed is long-term, you're no longer speculating on that. But
Correct.
short-term is still listed.
Correct.
I also have a question here that the 2017 student transportation policy says swing space transportation will be provided if a swing space is both outside the normal boundaries of the school and 1 mile or more from the school's regular address. But the current CPI supplement says, quote, in instances where there is no available swing space within 2 miles of a school undergoing modernization, DCPS will provide swing transportation.
Yeah,
Why'd you go from 1 to 2?
it's a typo. It is 1. And so we have a school right now that is exactly 1 mile and is getting swing space transportation. And so we regret the error, but that is a typo in the most recent CIP supplement.
Okay, should I ask whether you have staff to make sure they're not typos like that? Let me move on. I will note this, though. 1 mile from the school could be substantially longer for students depending on where they live. You understand the question?
I do. That was, we had a lot of conversation even about the 1 mile. And that was one of the points we discussed internally is, right, there is a radius around schools. There's also a large portion of our population that are out of boundary that come through lottery enrollment. And so that's something we're committed to as well. Providing that swing space for 1 mile.
Yes, which is longer for depending upon where one lives, and therefore still a problem.
Correct, which is why we provide it.
Why you
Are you advocating for us to provide a closer?
I don't know what I'm asking the questions.
Sure.
That's what I'm doing.
Okay.
Because it's just, we hear the complaints, and as you know, there's a bill pending in the committee that would, I think in part because of the distance to swing space, require DCPS to provide more funding to a school so that they're not penalized through the school's first funding act.
Right, and we do provide flexibility. So, depending on walkability, I think, it's also a balancing of resources. We spend about $7 million on swing space transportation. And so it's, we can always consider where there are needs within a community based on walkability as well. So we certainly take the community's input as we're thinking about swing space.
I want to go back to let me see, the small cap projects. So how does DCPS address equity with regard to small cap projects?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, we do some scoring of our small capital projects, especially amongst stabilization projects and enhancement projects. So there is weight applied to equity. In equity comes in various different forms in terms of the amount of money that we've spent, what wards that they're in, the amount of at-risk population. And so happy to provide additional follow-up material with you about how we do that prioritization.
I'll take you up on that. So that's a follow-up. Are small cap projects a way to address educational adequacy?
Yes, there's a number of we would consider those enhancements. And we know that schools use their buildings in different ways. And so, the design that was as the school was built may not necessarily meet the needs. We also try to balance that across our portfolio. And that's why within our ed spec, which we rely on, is making sure that we have an equitable number of spaces throughout the community. But yes, we would address those issues with small capital projects.
Although I'm kind of curious, because isn't educational adequacy inherent in the building? And so therefore, I mean, existed 5 years ago as well as 5 years from now in a particular building?
I'm sorry, say your question again.
Isn't educational adequacy inherent to the building?
I mean, I think when we talk about educational adequacy, right, some schools have, different sort of arrangements of specials or the way that they departmentalize programming that may or may not have been captured with the way that that school was operated a few years ago.
If it's special ed, yes.
No, not necessarily just special ed, but it's also, if you have a Montessori school, if you've departmentalized your curriculum within an elementary school, you need more pull-out spaces, you need more department level classrooms. And so that's something that we've been having a lot of conversations about. What does that look like within schools, making sure there's an equitable distribution of classrooms. We have some schools that want to have 7 special classrooms when our educational specification says, you're entitled to 3, right? But their school model may be different. And so that's something that we do use small capital projects to address, but also want to make sure that we do that in an equitable way.
Is there enough money in the budget for small cap projects?
Again, I think there's 3 sets of small capital projects. The way that we think about this: emergency, stabilization, and then enhancements. Obviously, we get a lot of requests from schools that say, "I don't like the way that my building functions. I want, to modernize this, or I want to move my lockers from here to here, or I want a specials classroom, or I want to break this up into, 2 pull-out rooms rather than a classroom." I would say that there are never enough resources to meet all of the desires of a school community. And that's where we really work towards prioritizing what is needed in a community based on equity as well.
Well, what about on the emergency and what was the other category?
Stabilization.
Yeah, what about those 2
I mean,
categories?
I think, and I'd also welcome my colleague to answer as well. The emergency stuff, we don't know.
Well, yeah, but from year to year, it ought to be roughly the same.
Yeah, and so we usually do have enough funding in there. The stabilization, right? Would we like to sometimes replace roofs faster? I think absolutely. But again, we look at what the useful life of a roof is, how long that we can stretch that out, how close it is to a modernization as well, balancing those resources.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, council member, we generally have enough funding to address the projects that we have planned. And it's the funding is somewhat fluid in some of the buckets, because some of it is some of our projects are pooled projects for the most part, like roofs. So whereas we may overspend in one area, we may underspend in another, and we can move, funds between projects. But overall, we have received historically enough funding to be able to execute the work.
Well, I'm thinking of the testimony we heard from the McKinley teacher at McKinley, where, if I remember correctly, it sounded like they're just having water infiltration problems everywhere. Wouldn't that be either emergency or stabilization?
So McKinley, I believe that fell under stabilizations, and now we do have a small cap project underway to replace the roof over there. I would have to go back and check as to the reason why the roof replacement there was not prioritized for an earlier year. But again, we've been able to get that project under solicitation, and now it's underway.
Could you get back to us on why McKinley didn't happen sooner?
Yes.
The roof? You're keeping track. Dr. Ashley, I want to go back to, I'd asked you on the small cap and equity, and you said you do weigh that. Do you have a formula for choosing how to spend the small cap dollars?
We do have weights assigned to that, and we can certainly follow up with you based on some of the weights that we use with regards to prioritization of projects.
And one of the weights is equity.
Correct.
And you will follow up.
I will.
The PACE Act requires DGS to conduct an annual survey on the condition of each public charter school facility and to disaggregate the results by facility. My understanding is that DGS doesn't conduct the annual survey. Instead, it's done by the Public Charter School Board. And the results are not shared in the disaggregate. Why?
So we do have a list, and I'm not too sure where the exact schools that were placed on that list of schools that are being looked at in terms of FCA and why public charters were excluded. But in our list, we have pretty much all of the schools that are in the DCPS's under DCPS's roster, and all of those are in a rotation that are being evaluated every year. There's at least 20 or so schools that are being evaluated, and it's based on resources.
Yeah, we talked about that earlier. I think it's every 5 years you try to get to every school.
Well,
You rotate so that every 5 years schools get evaluated. Isn't that what you said earlier?
That's right. So some schools, I mean, it's a range. Some schools are, I mean, for the most part, it's generally 5 years. Some schools, we may look at it a little bit sooner, depending on whether or not a modernization is pending or a small cap is pending, to move that up in a cycle to help inform what else needs to be done at that school. But in general, yes, it's every 5 years.
So what about the charter schools? The law requires DGS conduct the survey. Why is DGS not conducting it?
I do not have that answer right now, Council Member. I'll follow up with you on that.
Okay. I trust somebody's keeping track of what you guys are saying you're going to follow up on.
Yes.
And the law requires that the survey be disaggregated by each facility. And neither of those things are happening. Also, on that line, the PACE Act empowers the mayor to fine the public charter school board up to $10,000 a year if charter schools fail to cooperate with DGS's annual facility survey. Do you know if there's ever been a fine levied?
Not to my knowledge.
Not that I'm a fan of the government fining itself,
Right.
but there's a process here with regard to public charter school facilities, and it appears to have been largely ignored.
Not to my knowledge, I'm not aware of any fines being levied.
All right, so you'll get back to me on. So one of the factors in prioritizing under the PACE Act is enrollment, correct?
That's correct.
That was an easy question. And we have schools where they're struggling with enrollment. And those tend to be schools that are in lower income neighborhoods. And those also tend to be schools that are in need of modernization. So how do you overcome that with regard to prioritizing?
It's a great question. You know,
All my questions are great. I don't need
we do we do think about enrollment and how we continue to make all of our schools attractive. Many of the schools that you mentioned, some of our smaller schools have actually benefited from modernizations. But we know that there are some of our smaller schools that still need those. And so we do think about how that we continue to offer high quality programming. You're right that, you know, because of the weighting and the formula, those schools would be impacted by having a smaller enrollment and a smaller long-term enrollment projection. And so what we want to do is making sure that we're putting those schools on a pathway towards growth, and also balancing and making sure that all of our schools across the portfolio are well utilized.
All right, so how does that translate?
It means that if you have a school that's with declining enrollment, it's likely to see that their score on the PACE list would decline.
But it could be a school that lower income, so then we're not being very equitable.
So you do have other factors within the PACE as well, thinking about the boundary, thinking about investments in the feeder pattern. As well, the biggest overall weight is facility condition, which is 55% of the score. And so a lot of those factors are outweighed by the facility condition being the highest priority.
Maintenance. So I don't know how much I want to get into this, but I'm thinking of Roosevelt. When was Roosevelt modernized?
I want to say
10 years ago?
2016, yes,
And there are horrible problems with the HVAC system, correct?
that's correct.
And there are also some leaks.
That's correct.
Why?
I mean, you know, so with the HVAC system, our team has been, and again, these are mostly and by and large our FMD team that's working on it, but
Your who team?
our maintenance, our facilities maintenance team has been
Okay.
working continuously correcting issues at Roosevelt. And it's you know the and we've been asked in the past, what would it take to fix it once and for all? And I believe we've given numbers or presented numbers to do an overall modernization. But we continue to make investments and we continue to make improvements and we continue to fix and resolve issues. And to my knowledge, we do not have a significant, if any, outstanding work orders at Roosevelt.
So it's not leaking anymore and it's not going to be leaking anytime this year?
I mean, I can't say that it wouldn't be leaking anytime this year, but to my knowledge, we've reduced, if not resolved, the work orders at Roosevelt.
Well, I didn't ask you work orders. I kind of don't like that answer or that way of looking at it. The roof is new. It shouldn't be leaking.
Correct. If there's a new roof, yes, it should not be leaking. Agreed.
Okay.
And
My
if it-
understanding with the HVAC system is that it was so sophisticated that it can't be maintained and that's why it's not functioning.
Right.
At some
so
point, it's cheaper to just rip it out and put in a new one.
I do believe we had presented the numbers to do that a while back, and I don't believe it was approved. That HVAC
Approved?
system, you're correct, it's a VRF system, and we've been having issues with those throughout our entire DCPS portfolio. So it is and beyond DCPS, our entire DGS portfolio. So it is a system that we've moved away from to help resolve it in the future. But at Roosevelt, we're actively working to keep it online and to keep it in good shape.
So could you provide the analysis of the replacement cost versus the ongoing maintenance cost for that HVAC system?
If we could provide it?
Can you provide? You
Yes,
said
we can.
that analysis was done.
No, I think we were asked what would it cost to replace it, not necessarily to replace the entire HVAC system, not necessarily the analysis between maintenance and replacement.
Okay. Well, so you can provide half of my question, which is what it would cost to replace it, and
That's correct.
replacing it with a different system.
That's correct.
And the other half of my question would be, well, just what are you spending on maintaining it every year? And that would include as well as the cost for the company that you hire to maintain the building? Because a piece of their work is, a piece of their cost is maintaining that system, plus
Right.
then the additional repairs you have to do.
That's correct. So we can provide our costs to date or what we spend annually on maintenance. That's correct.
And why can't I extrapolate the experience with Roosevelt with other schools that are being modernized? Sort of the Mary Filardo point, which is that we can invest $1 billion in new facilities, but then we need to maintain them.
Because not all schools have the same issues. So it's sort of apples and oranges. Roosevelt has its own set of issues. It has the VRF concerns that we've been bringing up. Other schools, although they're being maintained, they may have a different issue that's systemic to that school that we are addressing. So it's difficult to say, Roosevelt issues are the same or would cost the same as a BARD, for instance. So it's very difficult to use the one size fits all for all of the schools across our portfolio.
Give me a second. Is it correct what was said earlier in testimony that DGS does not have a maintenance plan for each building, a proactive maintenance plan?
I would-
Proactive, comprehensive maintenance plan specific to each building. A little while ago, I looked at the DGS plan for how do I want to put it? Getting facilities ready for the start of the new school year. Well, that's not, I mean, that's sort of proactive, but it isn't by school. It's just very general. It's like a checklist. And I'm asking a specific proactive maintenance plan, comprehensive, for each individual school.
Council members, so I am over the capital construction project division. I will definitely
did
take
say
that
that
back
earlier.
to our maintenance team to see what their comprehensive plan is, and we can provide that. I mean, I would say that we do have a preventative maintenance plan, but I'm not too sure if that would meet your definition of comprehensive. We can provide what that is, in addition to any other context that we may have around a comprehensive plan.
Well, I'm not interested in seeing it unless it's specific to a school. Because the needs for Flora Henley are going to be different than the needs for John Eaton Elementary. Houston, Charles Hamilton Houston was renovated, modernized in 2020 or thereabouts. That's like 5 years ago.
I'm
pausing because you look like you're looking it up.
Right now, I can double check to
If
see
you're not
when
looking it
when
up, I don't need to
exactly.
pause.
Right. No, I don't have that number specifically or the year when it was modernized, but I can look into that.
2019.
2019.
Okay.
Okay. And my office received an email today about the heat in the library. It's been a problem since November. You might pass that on, by the way. This hearing may be a good way to get some maintenance requests taken care of. I mean, a brand new school and HVAC is not working?
I would say, generally speaking, and by and large, if it's a brand new school and it has an HVAC issue, generally it's covered under a warranty if it's a warrantable item. But for the most part, our new schools within the first year would go through a cycle, and it's sometimes normal to see not everything fully calibrated within that first year. But that, and that is not, that's not an indication that there's anything wrong with the system. It's just that we're working through, the seasons within that particular, or for that particular school. So that's not an excuse. That's not saying a brand new school should have problems. But it is to say that, we do see some growing pains or some calibration that occurs within the first year or so with its
Yeah,
being open.
I want to say yes and no. I don't know that I want to argue that too much. Of course, there are going to be some adjustments, but at the same time, if a professional is installing the HVAC and they understand what the program is, then they ought to be calibrating it to meet that program. That is, every room is equally warm in cold weather, and every room is equally cool in warm weather. I think I got that right. Well, Houston is what, 6 years old? And I doubt that's still warranty.
It depends. Yes. I mean, our typical HVAC warranties are anywhere between 15 and 20 years old, depending on the parts. I mean, I'm sorry, 15 to 20 years, depending on the parts, or depending on what it is that needs to be fixed. So, a school like Houston, yes, it depends on once the tech or once the boiler plant operator visits the site. If it's an issue that is warrantable, we'll definitely reach back to the vendor and make sure that they address it.
Will you get back to us with regard to Houston?
Okay.
Get back to us with regard to Houston. Councilmember Henderson, did I stimulate you to ask any other questions?
No, but it did stimulate me to actually look back at the committee report from 10 years ago to answer this question about the DGS and the charter schools. So that wasn't actually a new requirement of PACE. It had existed prior, before we got there. And charter schools hadn't been following it. And the fine actually wasn't the committee's idea at the time. That had also existed prior as well. We just chose not to delete it, even though PCSB had asked us to. So
Right.
it's available as an option, is all I'm saying.
Not that we're looking at finding ourselves, but
No, the report does say that the committee hoped that PCSB would simply add an annual condition assessment as part of its compliance for each of their charter LEAs, and then just submit that document. So not starting something new, but yes, a charter school would have to use funding to be able to have a professional come out and do the facility condition assessment in the same way that DGS does. And part of that was because charter schools did not want DGS in their buildings. And so it was like, okay, well, the other option is that you pay for it and just provide us with the information. I think one of the troubles there is that it would demonstrate the inequities that exist within the facilities, not by the choice of the government, but by the choice of some LEA leaders in terms of it's different, right? If you are operating out of an office building as opposed to a traditional school building, your facility condition assessment will look very different than of a DCPS facility. But I think it's still an interesting point. And just sort of to underscore what some of the public witnesses testified before, I think this is going to be a forced conversation. This is less involves DCPS, but more definitely DGS and the government as a whole, as we look at population overall. Do we just want to operate a system of school districts that are very, very small, and continue to open schools knowing that there aren't actually students who can occupy them? So I think that lots of interesting questions for us in the larger that these two gentlemen here, they would say is above our pay grade in conversation. I will ask though, on behalf of the young people who testified from Bell and Check, that DGS look at the existing work orders that exist for that school Because again, some of the things that they raised, I'm sure a work order exists for it, and it doesn't require a large capital project in order for you all to send out pest control or other things, but that could go a long way in helping to resolve some of those issues. And also asking someone to check the stairs, because in my head, I see it playing out of a railing in a hallway falling over and one kid, it's not going to be a good look. So if we can send out an engineer just to check the structural nature of some of the staircases in that school, I think that would be good as well.
Thank you. I have no other questions for you all. So I want to thank you for your testimony. I want to remind folks, this has been both an oversight hearing and a hearing on Bill 26-489. The record will close at 5 p.m. on Monday, February 23rd, 2026. Time is 3:21 in the afternoon.